The cool July morning of 2023 began with an unusual disturbance on Heather Lane in the suburbs of Riverside, California. 5 unmarked federal SUVs quietly pulled up in front of a modest, single-story house near the end of the street. Neighbors peered through curtain gaps, holding their breath as tactical geared agents fanned out to take positions around the front yard and both sides of the house. Inside, Andrew Hartman, 46, was preparing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for nearly 2 decades since leaving Hawaii and living as someone with no ties to his past. The urgent knocking sounded at 6:41 a.m. Andrew Hartman, FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance of Melissa Hartman in Kailua-Kona, Hawaii, in 2004. The agents later described Andrew's hand trembling slightly as he set down the cup, but his face remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for nearly 2 decades. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In mid-July 2004, Kailua-Kona awoke to a peaceful early morning, the air carrying the scent of sea salt and a thin layer of mist, typical when night had just receded from the west coast of Hawaii. The Kona Sea lay flat in the pale light, where the first silver streaks of the new day reflected on the gently rolling waves. The Royal Kona Resort remained silent, with its rows of palm trees standing motionless, and most guests were still asleep, with only a few night shift staff preparing to hand over their duties. In that quiet scene, Melissa Hartman, 37, appeared at the main pathway leading to the resort's grounds. A security guard recalled her stepping out quite early, carrying nothing noticeable, walking slowly but purposefully, as if wanting to enjoy the cool air before the sun rose higher. She walked along the stone-paved path toward the beach, where the sound of waves crashing was louder than any noise from the resort. An early jogger happened to see Melissa standing at the end of the pathway, facing the still hazy horizon, seemingly observing the water for a few minutes before turning toward Ale Drive, the famous coastal road that at that hour was almost deserted. No one paid further attention, as the sight of tourists waking early for a walk was not unusual in the area. But after that moment, Melissa did not reappear at the resort. No one spotted her on the beach, in the hallways, the restaurant areas, or any public spaces. When the family woke up and realized Melissa's room was untouched from the night before, they assumed she had gone out for exercise or to watch the sea. But as time passed, and the bench she usually sat on in the mornings remained empty, with no one seeing her return, a sense of unease grew clearer. They spread out to search within the resort grounds, walking familiar paths, asking staff at various areas, checking around the pool, the private beach area, and even the southern patio where Melissa sometimes read. Each step heightened the worry, as there was no sign of Melissa and no one at the resort remembered seeing her after that early morning. After scouring most possible locations, the family returned to the front desk to report the situation, requesting checks on whether anyone had seen Melissa leave the resort. Receiving no useful information, they realized this disappearance was no longer within the scope of a normal extended walk. Finally, after many tense minutes and no reasonable explanation, the family decided to contact local police to report that Melissa had vanished without a trace, and just minutes later, the call was forwarded to the Kona Police Department, where the duty officer immediately handled the information with the caution appropriate for an adult missing under unusual circumstances. Based on the family's initial statements, police requested an exact description of Melissa's identifying features: age, height, hair color, build, clothing, when she left the resort that morning, along with the most recent health status known to the family. They also noted accounts from resort personnel about the last time Melissa was seen in the beach-adjacent area and identified 2 witnesses who could provide key information: the night shift security guard and the early jogger. After compiling this data, the duty officer assessed that the case did not fit the voluntary absence category, meaning leaving willingly, since Melissa carried no essential items, did not inform her family, and had shown no similar behavior in the preceding days. Therefore, the file was immediately classified as missing adult, unusual circumstances, a category requiring rapid field response and immediate on-site verification. This classification was forwarded to the Coordination Center to activate patrol unit deployment procedures. The two closest officers were dispatched to the Royal Kona Resort with initial tasks including meeting the family directly to fully understand the timeline from when Melissa left, rechecking surrounding areas the family had searched but found nothing, verifying witness statements, and preliminarily assessing the plausibility of scenarios, accident, disorientation, or external interference. En route along Alley Drive to the resort, the officers simultaneously contacted the Data Aggregation Department to scan for similar missing persons reports in the area to check for patterns or prior risk indicators. Upon arrival, they coordinated with the front desk and resort security to confirm timelines related to Melissa's disappearance. All statements were consistent that she was only seen leaving the resort, with no records of her returning. This reinforced the initial judgment that the case could not be taken lightly, as prolonged absence in a busy tourist area without any observed signs of return was rare. Police began establishing the search perimeter, listing priority points in areas around the resort, and preparing the initial sweep to determine if Melissa was still nearby or had moved farther in a direction no witness had seen. After completing initial discussions with the family and resort staff, the two officers began sweeping the areas around the Royal Kona Resort, starting from the closest locations where Melissa was last seen leaving. They headed to the beach in front of the hotel, a narrow strip of sand between the black rock outcrops characteristic of the Kona coastline, where waves often crashed vigorously in the morning. There, police scanned along the water's edge for signs of sliding, unusual floating objects, or footprints leading to the sea's edge, but the morning sand was mostly smoothed by the night tide, erasing any potential traces. They continued along the resort's main beach access path, where stone steps led guests from the grounds down to the water. Each step was carefully inspected for signs of a fall, broken fragments, or scrape marks, but all were dry and showed no abnormalities. At the sea view railings, police checked for any items left behind or fallen near the wall's edge, but the area only had a few lounge chairs remaining from the previous night, nothing belonging to a missing person. Leaving the beach area, they moved to sweep the resort's common grounds, including stone-paved walkways, shaded palm courtyards, and connecting paths between buildings. At each spot, police looked for recognizable signs like clothing, purses, towels, or any objects that might relate to someone who had just passed through. However, everything was in normal condition, like any other morning at this busy resort. During the sweep, one officer noted an assessment of the terrain, especially the black rock outcrops, typical of Kona, along the shore. This terrain, formed from old lava, had surfaces that were urged slick with dew or seawater, and sudden height changes posed real accident risks. However, if an accident occurred within the resort, there would likely be impact signs like breakage, scratches, or marks on the rocks that the search team could detect. Yet this area showed no such signs. Police also observed the nearshore sea for any strange objects washed in by waves, but saw only seaweed and a few harmless driftwood pieces. They recorded wind direction, wave strength, and morning water levels to evaluate the possibility of Melissa being swept away by waves near the resort. But based on actual conditions at the time of the sweep, this scenario could neither be confirmed nor ruled out immediately. Continuing to expand within the resort, police swept secondary paths from the backgrounds to the coastal areas. These paths were rarely used in the morning and lay amid dense tropical foliage, but checking each section revealed no trampled grass, unusually broken branches, or any objects suggesting Melissa had entered. Another officer checked the resort parking lot, not suspecting the victim had a vehicle, but to see if any unfamiliar car had left that morning with unusual signs or strangers in the area. But there were no reports from security or night staff of suspicious movement. After returning to the outdoor area facing the main lobby, with views of the sea and the entire main pathway, police once again confirmed that if Melissa had returned to the resort via common paths, Someone would likely have seen her, or internal cameras would have recorded it. But initial checks showed no matching records. They even examined the pool area and surroundings, though the likelihood of the victim heading there was low. But as with every step in the early stage of a missing person case, they had to rule out even the smallest possibilities. The pool was still quiet in the morning, water clear, with no signs of disturbance or suddenly abandoned personal items. The sunbathing lounge area also had nothing noteworthy beyond towels left by guests from the previous day. Concluding the first sweep, police compiled notes that the entire resort area, from the hotel front beach, sea access paths, to the common grounds, showed no visual traces indicating Melissa's next direction or any signs she had an accident within the resort. The search within the resort grounds yielded no useful signs, prompting the police to move to the next step, expanding the search to the public coastal area along Alley Drive, the route where the early morning jogging witness reported seeing Melissa heading in that direction. The foot patrol team was divided into small groups to sequentially scan the road segments extending north from in front of the resort, where public beaches, such as Honnold's Beach and Old Kona Airport Park, are concentrated, locations that typically attract both locals and tourists in the morning. They walked along the roadside, observing each patch of land right at the water's edge, where strips of volcanic rock jut out into the sea, looking for simple traces like unusual footprints on damp sand, abandoned personal items, or spots showing signs of a slip and fall. However, the Kona shoreline in the morning is often heavily impacted by the nighttime tide, which flattens and evens out the sand surface, leaving no clear traces to guide the search. Meanwhile, the Coast Patrol team used small boats and light vehicles to skirt along the rocky shore sections inaccessible by road, observing from offshore inward to check for any strange objects washed in by waves or lodged between rock crevices. The Kona sea waves at that time were not overly strong, but sufficient to make spotting small objects difficult. The officers responsible for terrain observation noted high-risk areas such as rough black rock sections, natural stone steps sloping steeply down to the sea, or spots with strong currents, dangerous for anyone standing near the water's edge. Nevertheless, when these areas were thoroughly surveyed, there were no signs of a recent accident. No fresh scratches on the rocks, no debris or items washed ashore. The search team also expanded southward, passing the coastal strip near Keho, where many small beaches are interspersed with lava rock, but the morning emptiness and difficult-to-access terrain slowed the search without yielding results. In addition to on-the-ground tracking, police approached residents walking or exercising along this route, asking if they had seen any woman matching Melissa's description between dawn and early morning. Most of those questioned said they hadn't noticed or had only seen a few walkers whose faces were unclear, and no one could definitively confirm seeing Melissa after the jogging witness's report. In some less traveled road sections, police checked informal paths down to the sea that locals often use, but even these spots showed no signs of recent presence, no fresh skid marks, no broken branches, no abandoned items. The Kailua-Kona coastal terrain is diverse, combining paved road sections, narrow beaches, volcanic rock, and thin sand strips, allowing multiple directions of movement, but also making it hard to identify traces unless detected immediately. Police noted that the time from when Melissa was last seen to when the family reported her missing was long enough for any subtle traces to be erased by wind, tide, or surrounding human activity. When the search team returned to the assembly point to compile results, they faced a clear reality. There was no specific information or sign indicating Melissa's direction of movement after leaving the resort area. No additional witnesses, no visual evidence, and no anomalies along the shoreline that could suggest which way the victim had gone. The expansion of the search along Alley Drive, which was expected to narrow the space where Melissa might appear, ultimately revealed a complete void in data. This forced police to acknowledge that Melissa's disappearance could not be explained by a clear direction of movement, and that she might have left the coastal area in a way not fitting the typical patterns predicted by the search force. After the expanded search yielded no clues, the Kona Police Department shifted focus to compiling all witness statements, a necessary step to reconstruct the final time frame when Melissa was last seen before vanishing. Since the Kailua-Kona area in the morning has much activity from tourists and locals, police divided into groups to approach each area around the Royal Kona Resort, the beach in front of the hotel, public sea access paths, and along Ali Drive to reach those present during the relevant time frame. The first group returned to the resort to record statements from early shift staff, including front desk, night security, and those preparing the kitchen area, all who might have inadvertently seen Melissa while performing their duties. A front desk employee confirmed seeing her pass through the lobby door while it was still dimly light, walking quickly and appearing focused like someone accustomed to early rising. A cleaning staff member working near the South Resort hallway reported hearing light footsteps moving through the corridor toward the side gate to Ali Drive. But since many guests wake early, she didn't pay close attention and couldn't confirm if it was Melissa. The night security guard said he saw a female figure heading toward the path near the beach, but it wasn't light enough to see the face clearly. However, based on the family's description, he thought the build was quite similar to Melissa's. Police carefully noted each account, cross-referencing with service times, staff shift changes, and the volume of people moving in the resort area in the morning to build a reasonable timeline. The second investigation group approached tourists jogging along Ali Drive, a group often considered highly reliable witnesses in disappearances near resorts because they are outdoors during the critical time. A couple from California said they saw a long-haired, slender woman walking north near the area in front of Honol's beach, but they only glanced and couldn't confirm it was Melissa. Another jogging tourist, the one who initially reported seeing Melissa from afar, was questioned in more depth by police. He said he likely saw Melissa when the woman was walking along the seaside on the road shoulder near the resort, but he only caught a quick look while maintaining a steady running pace. He remembered she wasn't carrying any bag or obvious items and seemed to be following a familiar route. However, he also confirmed he didn't see her on any other part of the road during his entire run. The third investigation group approached local residents, those who go to the sea early to fish, exercise, or clean near their homes. An elderly man living near the intersection of Ali Drive and a small sea access path said he was at the beach very early that morning but didn't see anyone matching Melissa's description. A woman walking her dog said she often encounters many tourists strolling during that time, but that morning there were fewer people than usual and she didn't recall seeing anyone like Melissa. Police also checked security cameras from some stores along the route, but most cameras at that time had poor quality and weren't aimed at the road, while the few at the resort recorded very limited lobby areas and weren't much help. Once enough statements were collected, the analysis team began systematizing the information chronologically. From the front desk and security estimates, Melissa most likely left the resort while it was still twilight, heading toward the side gate or along the beach in front of the resort. The jogging witness saw a woman with a similar appearance moving north on Ali Drive, suggesting Melissa may have left the resort area to walk along the shore, consistent with the habit of many tourists enjoying Hawaii's early morning air. But from the time the jogging witness saw her until police expanded the search, no one else could confirm Melissa's presence. In particular, no statements verified that she left the coastal area or turned into inland streets. This made determining Melissa's movement path especially difficult. If Melissa walked along Ali Drive, there should have been more sightings since the route is quite busy in the early morning. If she turned down a small path to a rocky beach or hidden shore, some residents or early fishermen likely would have noticed. But all data was blank. The absence of any additional witnesses after the last sighting point led police to realize that Melissa vanished abruptly in a very short time frame and in a direction no one observed. The analyzing officers concluded that either Melissa turned into a little-traveled path right after the last witness point, or some unexpected factor occurred, preventing her from continuing the predicted route. But without visual evidence or additional statements, they couldn't determine what happened. After compiling all testimony, police concluded that the witness information did not help narrow the area Melissa might have moved to, nor did it create any new investigative leads. After compiling all witness statements but gaining no additional useful clues, the Kona Police Department was forced to shift focus to analyzing Melissa's range of movement based on time, location, and on-site conditions recorded on the morning she disappeared. This was an investigative step more theoretical than practical, but particularly crucial in disappearances lacking witnesses confirming direction after the last sighting point. First, the analysis team built a map based on the time frame Melissa left the resort and the time elapsed until the family noticed the unusual situation. If Melissa left the resort while it was still dimly light and unhindered, the average walking speed of an adult on flat coastal terrain is about 5 kilometers per h. This meant that in the first 20-30 minutes, she could easily move to nearby areas such as Honol's Beach, the shoreline in front of small shops on Ali Drive, or lesser-known sea access paths. If the time extended to 45 minutes to 1 hour, the movement range expanded significantly, encompassing the entire northern shoreline up to Old Kona Airport Park or southward to the Coho Strip. However, determining the starting point, the exact location where Melissa was last seen, was not entirely clear because the statements did not fully align in terms of timing. The analysis team created multiple scenarios corresponding to different possibilities: Melissa leaving the resort toward the beach, turning out the side gate to Ali Drive, or moving to small paths leading down to lava rock slabs by the water. Each direction was drawn as a possible movement zone, gradually expanding over time. When overlaying these zones, police realized an unfavorable reality: Melissa could be at dozens of locations along the coastal route in under an hour. However, after completing the theoretical calculations, the analysis team had to further evaluate human factors and the victim's health to see if Melissa was capable of traveling as far as the model suggested. The family stated Melissa was completely healthy, with no history of serious medical conditions or issues impairing cognition. She was not taking sleep-inducing drugs or anything affecting reaction ability, nor were there signs of unusual fatigue or stress before the disappearance. This led police to rule out the possibility of Melissa becoming disoriented due to physical or medical factors. Nevertheless, they noted that the early morning Kona environment with high humidity, rising temperatures, and sunlight reflecting off the sea could cause dizziness in someone unaccustomed to island weather if walking too far or standing near slippery rock areas. From there, the analysts examined 3 main scenarios, each dissected based on field data and human behavior. The first scenario: Melissa simply walked too far. This is a common possibility in tourist disappearances and was considered the baseline when no signs of criminal activity exist. If Melissa walked along the shore and continued in a direction she found relaxing or appealing, such as towards secluded rock sections, she could lose track of distance. However, police questioned that if Melissa was just strolling, she would appear within sight of joggers, walkers, or fishermen, but no one saw her. This made the walk too far without incident scenario less convincing. The second scenario: Melissa suffered a natural accident. Given Kona's characteristic terrain, coastal accidents are entirely possible. Black lava rock with many cracks, slippery surfaces, especially with morning dew or waves from the night tide. If Melissa slipped or lost balance, she could fall into crevices between rocks, very hard to see from above or afar. However, police had considered this during the search, but found no traces like skid marks, debris, or dropped items. Morning sea waves were not strong enough to completely erase traces if an accident occurred. Still, they had to admit there were small, treacherous coastal spots the search team could not fully access, especially rock hollows hidden by tide. The third scenario: Melissa had contact with a third party, meaning another person's intervention in the disappearance. This was a sensitive scenario, and police could not declare it early without evidence. However, based on the sudden disappearance model and complete information void after the Tseho sighting, some investigators began including this possibility in theoretical analysis. They asked, If another person, known or unknown, approached Melissa in a very short time right after she left the resort, could it avoid surrounding eyes? The answer was yes, if it happened in a low-traffic spot or quickly without drawing attention. However, no witnesses reported seeing Melissa talking to anyone, walking with anyone, or any vehicle stopping near the area. This kept the third-party scenario at a hypothetical level without basis for deeper investigation. Police also considered unusual movement patterns, for example, if Melissa accidentally followed an unofficial trail into dense vegetation or abandoned inland areas instead of continuing along the shore. But Kona's terrain near the resort is mostly coastal road and small residential areas, with few paths that could cause complete disappearance without traces. When compiling all analysis, police realized the most concerning point: despite mapping a very wide area, all possibilities returned to one common point: there was no sign Melissa left the coastal area, but also no evidence she remained in it. When the movement range analysis yielded no breakthrough and all hypotheses remained in an indescribable void, the Kona Police Department decided to intensify expanded search with support from the Hawaii County Search and Rescue Team, a force with special experience in scanning coastal terrain and the island's treacherous areas. It was during this range expansion phase, extending both north and south of Kailua-Kona, that a series of small but meaningful discoveries began to emerge, opening new investigative directions previously unimaginable. On the morning of the third day since Melissa was reported missing, the SAR team expanded the search area south of Ali Drive, beyond black lava rock sections, where terrain becomes hard to track. A three-person group, while clinging to the rock edge to check deep cracks often hit hard by waves, accidentally discovered a small object lodged between two boulders, blown in by seawater and held tight as if it hadn't been there long. Upon closer approach, they realized it was a light blue hair tie. Under early sunlight, its color stood out against the black rock and gently rising seawater. The SR team immediately secured the object, placed it in a preservation bag, and marked the GPS coordinates at the discovery site about 1.1 kilometers south of the Royal Kona Resort as the crow flies. When police brought the hair tie to the family for confirmation, Melissa's mother said Melissa usually carried 2 to 3 hair ties in her bag or on her wrist, and light blue was her most used color as it matched the beachwear style she wore in her first days in Kona. The family could not confirm 100%, but said it was very similar to Melissa's items more than any other color. This was the first personal item to appear since Melissa vanished, and though not definitive evidence, it held important directional value. Police immediately evaluated 2 factors. First, the distance from the resort to the discovery point. Second, the possibility that Melissa, if walking in this direction, could reach this spot within the time frame from leaving the resort to complete loss of trace. At average walking speed, Melissa could easily cover this distance in 20-25 minutes, fitting predictions from the movement range analysis. This made the South Elia Drive area a zone for deeper expanded search, especially rock crevices, natural hollows, and dangerous slopes leading to the sea. Just hours after the hair tie discovery, another SAR team approached the northern area near Honnold's Beach to scan in the opposite direction, aiming to rule out Melissa moving this way before turning to rock beaches. While sweeping along the sandy shoreline and low boulders, they found a light object stuck among broken coral pieces, half a distorted plastic water bottle with the label faded but still readable as Kona Coast Grocery. This was a type of water bottle commonly sold at a small store less than 200 meters from the resort, where Melissa's family said she had stopped to buy a few light items the evening before the disappearance. Police could not confirm this was Melissa's bottle, but noted the distorted shape was consistent with being wave-washed onto rocks in a not too long period. The discovery coordinates were nearly 2 kilometers north of the first site, creating 2 dispersed points in completely opposite directions. This posed a challenge for the analysis force. If both items belonged to Melissa, it meant she moved in both directions or went one way but water currents carried items the other. A SOUR team member with 12 years of experience studying Kona currents stated that light objects like hair ties and plastic bottles could absolutely be carried by nearshore currents, especially on days with low waves but constantly shifting coastal winds. However, the hair tie was deeply lodged in a rock crevice and the water bottle appeared in a shallow shore area, indicating the two objects likely fell into the sea at different locations or were wave-pushed ashore at different times. Still, police did not rule out that one of the two items was unrelated to Melissa, as tourist areas often have litter from visitors. The third discovery, and the one police paid special attention to, emerged that same afternoon. A dive shop employee near Ali Drive, while being re-questioned by police about security cameras, suddenly remembered that the previous morning he had picked up a small wet towel washed up in front of the shop, thinking it was lost guest property and placing it in the lost and found bin. When police asked to see the towel, they realized its color was very similar to the one Melissa often used at the beach per family photos, cream white with light blue trim. The towel had no distinctive markings, but the fading and remaining seawater smell led police to view this as a potential discovery. They immediately recorded the shop's location, about 500 meters north of the resort, and questioned whether this could be a point where Melissa stopped or was pulled in this direction after leaving the resort. 3 items, a hair tie, a plastic water bottle, and a small towel, appeared at 3 different locations, south, north, and near the central area. All could belong to Melissa, and all could be unrelated exceptions. However, combined with no witnesses seeing Melissa after the final point, these items, though small, became rare links in an almost empty data chain. The Kona Police Department immediately began analyzing distances between the 3 discovery points. They realized all lay within a coastal area with complex surface currents, where light objects could move in multiple directions in a short time. Terrain maps showed many natural rock protrusions, causing waves to deflect, potentially pushing items ashore from south to north or vice versa. But there was also another possibility. Melissa moved in a non-linear path, unlike police assumptions. She could have gone north, stopped, then turned south, or accessed 2 different areas in a short time due to the coastal terrain interwoven with many small trails. These 3-item discoveries prevented police from maintaining the hypothesis that Melissa followed only one direction. It also opened the possibility that she moved in a much wider area than the initial map. By the end of that day, the investigation team sat down to compile the 3 discovery points, place them on the map, and find a reasonable intersection between movement path, environmental impact, and item drop possibilities. After the emergence of 3 discovery points for items suspected to be related to Melissa, but scattered in different directions, making the movement model difficult to determine, the Kona Police Department decided to expand the investigation in another direction. The possibility that Melissa left the coastal area by public transportation or a third-party vehicle. Although this hypothesis was not highly rated in the early days, the items appearing in multiple separated locations forced police to consider all possibilities, including that Melissa might have traveled farther than initially predicted. First, police contacted all taxi companies operating in Kailua-Kona in 2004. This was the period before ride-hailing apps existed, so data sources mainly relied on drivers' manual logbooks, company shift schedules, and cash or card payment receipts. Most tourists at that time still paid cash, making tracing even harder. Taxi companies in Kona typically operated routes around Kona Airport, resorts along Alia Drive, and the Kona Marketplace area. Police reviewed every logbook for the 3 days since Melissa was last seen. They focused on rides originating near the Royal Kona Resort, especially between dawn and 8 a.m. on the day Melissa disappeared. However, no taxi rides originated from the resort or were called from nearby locations, matching Melissa's time frame. Some drivers interviewed directly said that morning was quite normal, and there were no young female passengers traveling alone matching Melissa's description. One driver said he picked up an elderly Canadian couple near the resort area, but had no solo female passengers in that time frame. Another driver said he usually picked up guests at the resort more in the evenings than mornings, and that morning he had no rides from the South Alia Drive area, where the SAR team found the hair tie. Second, police checked the 2004 Hawaii County public bus system records, which operated with sparse frequency and mainly served locals. The closest bus route to the Royal Kona Resort was the Kailua-Kona shuttle, running along Alia Drive, but with frequency only every 45-60 minutes in the early morning, and it usually started from the Kona market area, rather than stopping in front of the resort. Police checked the schedule for the incident day and determined that the first bus of the day stopped near Honol's Beach, later than the time Melissa was last seen. Additionally, the bus driver on duty that day, when questioned again, only remembered a few regular local commuters going to work early. He did not recall any young tourist passengers or anyone matching the description. Police also checked the day's ticket log, but since most passengers used monthly passes or paid cash without personal information management, no data indicated Melissa had boarded a bus. Third, police considered the possibility that Melissa used resort-arranged transportation, such as guest shuttles or private transfers from tour companies. The Royal Kona Resort occasionally coordinated with tour operators for early morning activities like manta ray snorkeling or paddleboarding, but resort staff confirmed no tours departed at the time Melissa left the resort. The resort shuttle driver also confirmed he started his shift later and did not transport any guests in the mentioned time frame. When police approached tour companies in the area, none recorded a solo female passenger during that time. Fourth, police examined the possibility of using informal vehicles, such as private cars from locals or unofficial rentals. However, in 2004, Kailua-Kona had no modern rideshare services and no traffic cameras recording license plates like in large cities. Moreover, most coastal routes had low traffic in the morning, mainly locals commuting to work or delivery vehicles for shops preparing to open. Police interviewed additional residents living near road sections where Melissa might have accessed. A small grocery store owner said that morning he saw a pickup truck pass by, but no female passenger. A homeowner near the Southern Rock Beach said vehicles entering and exiting the area were not many, and he was certain he saw no young woman getting in or out of a vehicle while he was in his yard. Finally, police rechecked all possible surveillance systems around Alia Drive in 2004. Since surveillance technology was limited at the time, many cameras used blurry magnetic tapes, low-resolution interfaces, or were pointed inside stores. Cameras facing the road only captured fuzzy images, unable to identify faces or clothing of pedestrians, let alone confirm Melissa passed by in the relevant time frame. After reviewing all taxi, bus, shuttle, personal vehicle, and rudimentary surveillance data, police concluded there was no evidence Melissa used any form of public transportation or driven vehicle. This meant she almost certainly remained within walking range around the resort when she vanished. But this conclusion brought the case back to the original mystery: if Melissa did not get into a vehicle, did not leave the area by any means, and was not seen by anyone after the last sighting point, then her entire disappearance must have occurred within a very small radius, one so small it was hard to explain because the area was not deserted in the morning. After checking, public transportation yielded no leads, and the items suspected to belong to Melissa appeared in scattered positions without forming a clear path. The Kona Police Department was forced to move to a high-intensity search phase, both on land and underwater, a major escalation in Hawaii County missing persons procedures, typically activated only when serious accident or life-threatening situations are deemed significant. This expanded search required coordination from multiple units: Hawaii County Fire Department helicopters, K-9 units specialized in missing persons, Marine Patrol teams, and the SR force already involved in previous days. The campaign's goal was to sweep all high-risk areas around Kailua-Kona within the maximum radius Melissa could reach on foot or be carried by currents if an accident occurred near the water's edge. On the first deployment day, Helicopters were mobilized to scan along the coastline, starting from north of Old Kona Airport Park down to the Kailua area in the south. From above, the observation crew looked for unusual signs: bright-colored clothing caught on rocks, reflective items, or any strange shapes emerging among the characteristic black volcanic rocks of the Kona shoreline. They flew low over treacherous terrain sections where sharp rock surfaces form crevices that waves easily sweep light objects into, but could also retain larger traces if someone slipped. However, despite hours of continuous scanning, no noteworthy discoveries were made. The most treacherous areas, low cliff sections interspersed with natural stone steps south of Ali Drive, were scanned multiple times but still showed no signs like fresh scratches on rocks, clothing caught, or wave-washed items visible from the helicopter. Meanwhile, the K9 team was deployed in parallel to track scents on land. Each dog was taken to the 3-item discovery points, hoping to determine scent dispersion direction and narrow down paths Melissa might have taken. But due to the wide coastal area, daily foot traffic, and strong sea winds, scent traces often dissipate quickly, especially after 3 days since Melissa's disappearance. As a result, K9C could not follow a continuous scent trail at the hair tie discovery point. The dog only nosed toward the wind, then lost the trail. At the towel discovery point, scent direction was disrupted by humid air and smells of coral, seafood, and marine debris. At the water bottle discovery point, K9 reacted lightly but led to no specific location. Police noted that elapsed time had significantly reduced the informational value K9 could gather. Meanwhile, the Marine Patrol team conducted nearshore underwater surveys. Professional divers swept areas suspected of large rock hollows or where whirlpool currents could sweep and retain heavy objects. Some sections near Honol's beach have cluttered submerged rock surfaces, forming deep pits and dangerous crevices. Although waves were not strong, divers still had to follow guide ropes to avoid getting trapped. They checked every rock hollow, every underwater depression that could conceal large objects, but found no signs of clothing, personal items, or human remains. Kona nearshore currents in those days were quite mild, leading police to rule out the body being carried dozens of kilometers in just hours. If an accident occurred, the body would likely remain near the rock shore, but finding nothing reduced the accident hypothesis credibility. In addition to underwater search, the SAR team continued expanding inland, especially in less noticed areas above the shoreline, including unofficial trails leading into brush or low vegetation, typical of Hawaii's coastal zones. Some inland areas near Alea Drive are described as dry forest or mini rainforest, dense mixtures of shrubs, thick undergrowth, and rough volcanic rock ground. If Melissa accidentally turned into here, visual search becomes much harder, and SAR had to use probe sticks to check rock hollows hidden under vegetation. But throughout many hours of searching, no signs like dropped towels, fresh shoe prints in soil, fabric scraps, or personal items. In particular, SAR paid attention to low cliffs where many tourists go to watch waves, but even these spots showed no evidence of a recent accident. They closely observed rock edges for skid marks, shoe prints, or freshly broken stone from body weight impact, but all showed no unusual disturbance. Some investigators even suspected Melissa might have fallen into a deep rock crevice, then been covered by water. However, divers and aerial observations found no locations matching this hypothesis. The failure to find a body also led many investigators to think that if it was an accident, it had to be an extremely rare type, one making the victim completely vanish from sight while leaving no physical traces, something almost unheard of in Kona coastal falls. When the high-intensity search day ended without new discoveries, police faced a harsh reality. All efforts on sea, air, and land yielded no sign of Melissa. The Kona Police Department had to confront an unavoidable truth: no body, no new physical evidence, no clear direction to follow. This pushed Melissa's disappearance into the state every investigation fears most. The state where it cannot be proven the victim is alive, but also cannot conclude the victim is deceased. The absence of a body over many days of searching was particularly concerning, because in Hawaii coastal accidents, bodies are usually found within hours to days depending on tide conditions and area depth. Yet here, despite divers sweeping the most dangerous rock hollows, helicopters scanning the entire shoreline, and marine patrol surveying every shallow water section, there was still no trace of a human body. This led many investigators to admit that the probability of a natural accident was significantly lower than in the early days. However, the lack of clear evidence of criminal activity also prevented police from shifting the case to criminal investigation. Additionally, the previously discovered items, the hair tie, towel, and water bottle, did not form a logical clue system. They could indicate Melissa moved in different directions, could be coincidental marine debris washed ashore in the same time frame, or could be her items but not reflect a clear path. No witnesses saw Melissa after the final sighting point. No cameras recorded her, no taxi, bus, or public transportation data, no signs of struggle on rocks, no evidence she left Kailua-Kona by road or sea. All formed a prolonged void, and the longer it lasted, the farther the chance of finding answers became. The Kona PD internal investigation team reviewed numerous other disappearance models to see if any direction remained untapped. They compared the case to getting lost in Mauka rainforests. But Melissa had no reason to leave the coastal area and go deep inland. They considered tourist sweep-away cases, but they did not match that morning's water conditions. They even rechecked historical missing persons records in Kailua-Kona, but found no common denominator. Every analysis path led to deadlock. Without a body, Hawaii law does not allow concluding the victim is deceased without strong evidence. This led to Melissa's file being classified only as missing person, suspicious circumstances, meaning police acknowledged the disappearance did not fully fit typical accident models. But there was no evidence to declare it a kidnapping, violence, or other crime. The file was temporarily closed but not fully. It remained active pending new evidence, meaning open to any new leads, if they emerge in the future. Melissa's family continued to hope, but police could no longer maintain a large-scale search campaign without realistic basis. The prolonged deadlock for many months after Melissa disappeared left the Kona Police Department without sufficient basis to maintain an active investigation, and by early 2005, the case was officially transferred to the Hawaii County Cold Case Unit, the division responsible for unresolved cases across the entire Big Island. This handover, a bureaucratic process but one heavy with symbolism, marked the acknowledgement that everything the investigative force could do in the initial phase had been completed, and there were no signs the case could be solved in the short term. The Cold Case Unit received the file with all documentation: witness statement transcripts, search maps, scene photos, item discovery coordinates, helicopter reports, canine records, and all movement range analyses. However, no matter how the dedicated team tried to reconstruct the chain of events from scratch, they reached the same conclusion as the Kona PD before them. Melissa vanished without a trace in too short a time frame, in too open an area, with no additional physical evidence or witnesses. In the following years, Melissa Hartman's file was periodically reviewed according to the Cold Case Unit's standard procedure. Every 6 to 12 months, an assigned investigator would revisit all documents, cross-reference with other cases in the area, and check if any new information had been reported or if evidence needed reanalysis using more modern methods. But from 2005 to around 2010, not a single lead emerged, no late witnesses, no drifting item discoveries, no body, no false confessions, and no reports from tourists who had been in Kona at that time. Even information from disappearances on the Big Island, or Maui, during the same period showed no similarities that investigators could link. In 2011, the Cold Case Unit conducted a review campaign of long-term disappearances in Hawaii to find common denominators related to tourists walking early in the morning, but Melissa's file did not match any event sequence. In subsequent years, despite the development of DNA analysis technology, Melissa's file had no DNA samples to process. No items definitively confirmed as hers, no blood, no biological samples, no abandoned clothing. One cold case unit investigator once noted in an internal report, the Melissa Hartman case lacks the foundation to restart. We have no second starting point, no verifiable alternative hypothesis, no environmental or physical factor to readjust the investigative direction. During this time, Melissa's family continued to maintain contact with police, but over time, the frequency of communication spaced out as there was nothing new to discuss. No one in the family lived in Hawaii, and after the persistent early years, they accepted that the case might never be solved. The only person who tried to keep the file updated was Andrew, the boyfriend who traveled with Melissa in 2004. In the beginning, he frequently contacted Kona PD to inquire about progress, re-provided statements when requested, and stayed in touch with the cold case investigator handling the file. But by around 2009, Andrew moved to California, started a new career, and gradually reduced case-related contacts. There was no indication his departure was connected to the disappearance, and the official record noted him as a person of interest cleared, meaning someone once involved, but no longer within the investigative scope. After Andrew left Hawaii, both families essentially lost local connections, and the file gradually gathered literal dust as a true cold case. From 2010 to 2020, the cold case unit conducted a total of 3 major file reviews in large cycles. Every few years, when new technology emerged, or there was personnel change in the investigative team. But the results remained unchanged, no leads strong enough to reopen the case. One veteran investigator described Melissa's case as one of the quietest disappearances he had ever handled. No anonymous calls, no struggle scene, no matching reports from elsewhere, no signs of self-harm behavior, and no potential suspects. In 2021 and 2022, the file was reviewed as usual under the Big Island Cold Case Unit's procedure, but it remained stagnant. Internal reports noted that Melissa's case had virtually no chance of resolution based on existing documentation. Every effort had already been tried. The case fell into prolonged stagnation for 18 years, from 2004 to 2022, with no turning points, no new data, or any random discovery strong enough to awaken the file from hibernation. Over nearly 2 decades, Melissa Hartman's name remained on the Big Island's long-term missing persons list, a name mentioned only during cold case file reviews, then drifting back into silence, as if her disappearance had dissolved into the Kona landscape, awaiting something, an unexpected event, a chance discovery, or a natural upheaval to revive the case after nearly 2 decades of darkness. In early 2023, just as Melissa Hartman's file had lain dormant for nearly 2 decades in the cold case unit, the Big Island was hit by one of the strongest storms recorded in recent decades, with heavy rain lasting many days and gusty winds causing severe erosion in sensitive terrain areas across the island. At Waipio Valley, the valley famous for its steep terrain, high cliffs, and ancient long-standing trails, the heavy rainfall triggered landslides on the eastern slope, washing away part of the thick soil and vegetation layer, exposing previously inaccessible soil and rock strata. When a DLNR team was dispatched to assess damage and determine risks to residents and tourists, they discovered the landslide had swept old soil layers down into the valley floor, creating a newly exposed bare area beneath the rainforest canopy. While surveying the area to check for fallen trees or large rocks blocking trails, a DLNR team member accidentally spotted something protruding from the fresh damp soil, initially thinking it was a broken tree root, but upon closer approach he realized it was not a root or decayed wood, but a bone structure resembling human bones. The DLNR team immediately sealed off the small area around the discovery point and notified superiors per protocol. Upon closer inspection of the eroded soil, several fabric scraps trapped between large soil clumps also emerged. Colors faded over time, but still recognizable as thin, light material similar to beachwear or tourist clothing. One of the fabric pieces had a light blue and white pattern, quite similar to the description the victim's family had provided about the outfit Melissa wore. The morning she left the resort in 2004, although DLNR had no authority to identify or determine the origin of the skeleton, the on-site team noted this was not a location with reports of deaths in recent years. Waipio Valley is a rugged, rarely visited area, and it is extremely uncommon for tourists to wander deep enough to get lost here, especially rarer for a disappearance matching the time frame suggested by the faded fabric. After completing initial documentation, DLNR immediately transferred the information and all scene data to the Hawaii County Police Department per regulations regarding suspected missing person remains. When Hawaii County PD checked pending missing persons reports that could match in time, age, and related area, the first name on the list was Melissa Hartman, missing from Kailua-Kona in 2004, never found, and in cold case files for 18 years. From there, the file was sent directly to Kona PD, the unit that handled the original investigation and where all historical case documents were stored. Within just hours of DLNR sending the report, information about the human skeleton discovered at Waipio Valley was forwarded to Kona PD. Cold case investigators for verification and assessment of possible connection to the 2004 disappearance, a sudden and weighty signal after nearly 2 decades with no movement in Melissa's file. When the information from DLNR reached Kona PD, the Cold Case Division immediately coordinated with Hawaii County Forensics to conduct necessary identification procedures. The entire remaining skeleton was carefully excavated under field forensic supervision, collecting leftover fabric scraps and surrounding soil samples to ensure no critical traces were missed. The bones were transported to the Hyla Identification Lab the same day, where experts began with morphological analysis to determine gender, age, and estimated time of death. Preliminary analysis showed the skeleton belonged to a young female, matching Melissa's age of 24 at the time of disappearance in 2004. Simultaneously, the degree of bone weathering, changes due to humid environment, thick soil, and rainforest vegetation indicated death possibly between late 2004 and early 2005, astonishingly aligning with the time frame of Melissa's disappearance. However, for definitive identification, DNA was the required standard. The forensic lab took samples from the femur and lower jaw, 2 sites that best preserve DNA in Hawaii's natural conditions. Since Melissa's family had provided DNA samples in 2005 in case of connection to any unidentified body, the comparison process was faster than in other cold cases. After nearly 2 weeks of extraction, amplification, and sequencing, the DNA results showed a complete match with Melissa's mother's sample. This confirmation ended all doubt. The skeleton found at Waipio Valley was Melissa Hartman, the woman who vanished from Kailua-Kona nearly 2 decades earlier. Immediately after identifying the victim, the forensic team focused on analyzing injury signs to clarify cause of death. Long bones and ribs showed no fractures from high-impact collisions, virtually ruling out falling from height or terrain accident. However, upon detailed examination of the neck area, specifically the hyoid bone and thyroid cartilages, experts discovered characteristic fractures often described in forensic reports as typical signs of external strangulation mechanism. This almost never occurs in ordinary falls or cliff drops. Additionally, the neck bones and laryngeal cartilage showed force application from the front and sides, consistent with hand or soft object compression with strong force, not matching any natural accident. Forensics issued a preliminary conclusion: Melissa's cause of death was asphyxiation due to neck compression, not falling, not drowning, and not any natural factor at Kailua-Kona or Waipio Valley. When analyzing soil clinging to the bones and fabric scraps, experts realized the soil type at the discovery site did not match Kailua-Kona coastal soil where Melissa was last seen. Soil composition, humidity level, mineral form, and microbial layer were more consistent with Waipio Valley rainforest, indicating Melissa's body had been in the valley long before the landslide. However, crucially, there were no clues on the bones suggesting Melissa reached the location under her own power. No leg bone fractures or injuries common in steep Waipio drops, no abrasion or scrape marks indicating the body was dragged over rocky ground. Notably, the body's position was found between stable soil layers at a depth where a person could not fall naturally without surface traces or disturbing upper vegetation. All this led to another conclusion: Melissa's body was not naturally transported to Waipio Valley. Someone had moved the body there and buried or hidden it in this treacherous terrain. In the official report, forensics clearly stated, the skeleton discovered at Waipio Valley shows no signs of natural victim movement before death. The body's presence at this location is the result of intentional relocation and concealment. This conclusion immediately eliminated all accident hypotheses once considered, most likely in 2004. Melissa was not swept by waves, did not fall off a cliff, did not get lost, did not vanish on her own. She was strangled to death. She was moved from Kailua-Kona. She was hidden in one of the Big Island's most inaccessible areas, and it was the 2023 storm, a random natural upheaval that broke through years of covering soil, that brought her body back to light, opening the door for Kona PD to revisit a case that had slept for nearly 19 years. The forensic confirmation that the skeleton at Waipio Valley was indeed Melissa Hartman, and the conclusion that the victim was strangled before being transported to the valley, prompted the Kona Police Department to immediately activate the case reactivation protocol, a step that had not occurred since 2004. The file, frozen for nearly 2 decades, was transferred back from the cold case unit to the active investigation team of Hawaii County, and a new group of investigators was assigned to review all historical documents from scratch, focusing on points once deemed unimportant in the initial phase, but which could now hold entirely different meaning under the light of new forensic data. The investigation team began by reconstructing the timeline of the day Melissa disappeared, based on all witness statements, search maps, discovered items, weather data, currents, and even notes from previous investigators. They paid special attention to 2 factors. First, Melissa never left Kailua-Kona by public transportation or taxi. Second, the walking range could not lead her from the coast to Waipio Valley, an area nearly 80 kilometers away by road, far beyond any possibility she could travel in the time frame immediately after her last sighting. This forced the team to ask the obvious but overlooked question from 2004, who had the capability to remove Melissa from Kailua-Kona and take her to Waipio Valley. When revisiting Andrew's statements, the boyfriend who traveled with Melissa in 2004, the investigators noticed several irregularities previously downplayed due to lack of criminal evidence. According to his initial statement, the morning Melissa left the resort, Andrew was still asleep and did not know where she went. Upon waking and not seeing her, he assumed she was out walking as usual. He emphasized there was no conflict between them, no arguments before her disappearance, and he did not leave the resort during that time. In 2004, this statement aligned with the absence of traces showing Melissa left Kona by any means and no recorded boyfriend-girlfriend disputes. However, the new forensic data changed the entire context. Melissa did not have an accident, did not get lost, did not leave the area on her own. She was murdered and transported. This required the team to re-examine every claim by Andrew, not just about the disappearance day but his overall behavior at the time. The investigators rebuilt Andrew's timeline based on his statements: the time he said he was sleeping, the time he woke up, the time he started looking for Melissa, the time he reported to resort staff. But when compared with the forensic report and the possible time of death, the team identified inconsistencies. Forensics concluded Melissa died between a few hours after her last sighting and the evening of the same day. This contradicted Andrew's claim that he was awake in the morning and continuously at the resort. If Melissa died just hours after leaving the resort, the victim could not have traveled far from Kailua-Kona without someone else's involvement. This led investigators to re-ask, did Andrew leave the resort during the period he claimed to be in the room? The reactivation phase also brought Andrew back to the center, no longer a cleared person of interest as in the cold case file. Investigators reviewed 2004 notes and realized no one besides Andrew had clear information about when Melissa left the room, as they were the only two sharing the resort accommodation. Additionally, upon re-examining their relationship, the team found details once overlooked. Resort staff recalled the couple seemed tense on the second day of the trip. A room service woman stated Melissa looked tired and like she had been crying the evening before disappearing. And Andrew repeatedly insisted in his initial statement that everything was completely normal. A detail the new team viewed as suspicious in a context lacking verification. When combining all data, Kona PD concluded Andrew's statements no longer aligned with the new forensic information. This shifted the official file from cold case, missing person, to active homicide investigation, and Andrew, after nearly 19 years absent from investigative documents, returned to the spotlight as the last person to see Melissa alive and the only one with access to the victim in the time frame leading to death. Once the file was officially reactivated as a homicide, the next critical analysis step was determining Melissa's movement feasibility from leaving the Royal Kona Resort to the forensic estimated time of death and transport to Waipio Valley. This was a scientific analysis combining geography, 2004 traffic maps, movement simulation, and death time frame to completely eliminate implausible hypotheses and confirm the necessity of vehicle use in the transport. First, Kona PD investigators mapped the distance between the Royal Kona Resort and the landslide site at Waipio Valley, where Melissa's body was found. Though only about 80 kilometers by modern roads, the route in 2004 from Kailua-Kona to Waipio Valley was far from convenient. The only route then was along Mamalahoa Highway, a long winding mountain road passing through sparse residential areas, taking 1 hour 45 minutes to 2 hours 15 minutes by car depending on traffic. Even starting early morning, no scenario allowed Melissa to walk, take a bus, or find public transport to Waipio within the forensic time frame. The analysis team also modeled the hypothesis victim left the resort on her own and walked farther than usual. Even walking continuously without rest at an average 5 kilometers per h, she could cover at most 20-25 kilometers in 5 hours. But Waipio Valley is northeast on the island, far from any reasonable walking route, with many highway sections completely unsuitable for pedestrians. Additionally, no witnesses, cameras, or reports showed a young woman walking an unusually long distance along the highway. This completely eliminated the possibility Melissa left Kailua-Kona on foot. After determining the victim could not walk, the team examined public transportation use. As per the 2004 bus route investigation, no bus departed early enough from Kailua-Kona to take Melissa to Anoka or Waipio Road, as inter-county buses started much later and mostly served local workers, not tourists. Even if Melissa somehow boarded a bus, she would need at least 2 transfers to reach near Waipio Valley, completely incompatible with the forensic time frame. Investigators continued evaluating the possibility of hitchhiking, but with low traffic on the Kona, Waipio Road early morning, and no witnesses reporting encountering her, this hypothesis lacked basis. Moreover, Melissa's behavior pattern per acquaintances showed no habit of hitchhiking or approaching strangers, especially on a trip. The analysis team also cross-referenced meteorological data, weather and light conditions, to determine that morning's environment. Sunrise was around 5:50 a.m., and based on witness statements about Melissa's last sighting, she left the resort while it was still not fully light. To be at or near Waipio Valley before death per the forensic window, Melissa had to be placed in a vehicle very early, right after leaving the resort or within an extremely short window. This aligned with the forensic conclusion that death occurred not long after her last sighting in Kailua-Kona. From these facts, the analysis team built two movement models. Model A, victim, approached near the resort, placed in vehicle within minutes. Model B, victim walked a short distance before being placed in vehicle in a less trafficked area along Alea Drive. Both models showed Melissa could not reach Waipio Valley on her own in any way. She was transported, and transporting the victim that far required the perpetrator to have a private vehicle and sufficient time to complete the move undetected. To reinforce the conclusion, the Hawaii County PD Geography Analysis Team used Waipio Valley terrain maps to evaluate the body transported to Valley by nature possibility, for example, swept by water from elsewhere. This was immediately rejected. Waipio Valley is an enclosed valley surrounded by sheer cliffs. A body could not be carried by ocean waves or floods from Kailua-Kona, as water flows do not connect the two areas. There were only two ways for the body to be in Waipio Valley: by road via Waipio Road or carried along valley trails. Both required intentional action and a vehicle. Bone analysis also showed the victim died before transport to Waipio Valley, as there were no impact fractures from high falls, no breaks consistent with cliff drops, and no scrape marks indicating dragging over Waipio's rough rock, meaning she was placed there post-mortem, not fallen or swept in. After cross-referencing all data, Kona PD affirmed a groundbreaking conclusion: Melissa Hartman did not disappear due to accident. She was subdued, murdered, then transported to Waipio Valley by vehicle. This was no longer a missing person case. This was premeditated murder. Once the conclusion that Melissa was murdered and transported to Waipio Valley by vehicle became certain, Kona PD immediately shifted to tracing vehicle movement on the disappearance day, a task nearly impossible with 2004 data when Hawaii had no traffic cameras. Smartphones were not widespread, and tourist photos were mostly stored on early digital cameras or even film. Yet this very limitation forced the team to think expansively. Instead of seeking traces via security infrastructure, they had to search through people. Tourists, residents, and anyone who photographed or filmed on the Big Island during Melissa's disappearance days. The investigation team compiled a list of hotels, tour shops, and tour companies operating around Kailua-Kona in summer 2004. Many had changed owners or closed, but some retained old archives on early hard drives, CD-ROMs, or mini DV tapes. Kona PD issued a community notice, not for witnesses, but for old photos, seemingly meaningless images of landscapes, roads, parking lots, or any vehicles accidentally captured. The goal was simple but bold: if the perpetrator used a car to take Melissa to Waipio Valley, that vehicle had to appear somewhere, on the road, at a rest stop, or near the valley entrance. The data collection campaign lasted over 6 weeks, during which investigators reviewed thousands of recovered old digital images from compact flashcards, 1999, 2004 IDE hard drives, and dozens of mini DV tapes. Most were just scenery, tourists smiling by the ocean, or helicopter tour shots. But in the 7th week, a group of investigators spotted a suspicious detail in a photo set submitted by a family from Oregon. They had visited the Big Island the exact week Melissa disappeared. In one image taken with a 2003 Sony Cybershot at the edge of Waipio Valley Lookout, a silver SUV appeared far in the background, parked off the dirt lot, not prominent, no visible license plate, and certainly not the photo's main subject. But when zoomed in, investigators noted a key detail: the body style and door trim matched the type of vehicle Andrew rented on the 2004 trip, a 2002 Ford Explorer Silver, clearly recorded in rental documents provided by Melissa's family in 2004. That year, with no crime evidence, police did not seize rental records for deep analysis. They only noted Andrew returned the car on time and it was cleaned per standard company procedure. But now, a nearly identical SUV appearing at Waipio Valley, nearly 80 kilometers from Kailua-Kona, during Melissa's disappearance timeframe became an unignorable lead. The team immediately extracted EXIF data from the original photo. Though 2003 cameras stored limited metadata, the date and time remained intact. 7:46 a.m., July 17. 2004, the exact morning Melissa vanished. Cross-referencing with forensic analysis, this time fell within the window the victim could have died and the body been transported. When inputting the EXIF data into the new timeline map, Kona PD built a feasible model. If Andrew placed Melissa in the vehicle right after she left the resort, between 5:40 and 6 o'clock a.m., he could absolutely drive to Waipio Valley Lookout in about 1 hour 45 minutes. The SUV in the photo appeared at the right time, right place, right model, and right color, though not yet confirmable as Andrew's. The convergence of multiple factors elevated suspicion to high probability. The photo forensics team also conducted optical analysis, comparing door length to height ratios, rear window shape, and body reflection details. Results showed over 87% similarity with the 2002 Ford Explorer, a figure high enough to include the photo as potential evidence. Investigators continued reviewing other images in the same collection, and in a second photo taken minutes later, the SUV had vanished from the frame, meaning the vehicle stopped only briefly or was leaving. This further aligned with the perpetrator model of pausing to scout the area before taking the body down into the valley or selecting a trail to the burial site. The appearance of the SUV photo at Waipio Valley on the exact morning Melissa disappeared became the missing piece for Kona PD. To begin connecting the entire chain of evidence, a chain of events spanning nearly 19 years, once broken, fragmented, and seemingly unconnectable. But when placing the 2023 forensic data, geographic analyses, Andrew's contradictory statements, and the photo clue into the same system, the full picture began to emerge, no longer a mysterious disappearance, but a premeditated murder, with the sole perpetrator capable of executing the sequential acts, taking the victim's life, transporting the body, and concealing it in one of the Big Island's most treacherous areas. First, the 2023 forensic data played the central role. Melissa died from strangulation, not accident. Estimated time of death on the same morning she vanished. Body intentionally moved and buried, no signs the victim was drawn by nature or reached Waipio Valley on her own. This completely eliminated all prior hypotheses involving coastal accident or getting lost. Additionally, geographic analysis reaffirmed that the victim could not leave Kailua-Kona for Waipio Valley by any spontaneous means. No bus, no taxi, no suitable road route, no pedestrian data crossing mountain roads. The victim was transported by vehicle. Next was the SUV photo, the only evidence from 2004 that could place a vehicle near Waipio Valley Lookout at the exact time of the victim's death. Though the image was not clear enough for a license plate, the similarity in body style, color, and model year to the Ford Explorer Andrew rented made it a critically important piece. When EXIF analysis showed the photo timestamp at 7:46 a.m., about 1 hour 45 minutes after Melissa's last sighting, investigators understood this was no longer random coincidence. If the perpetrator removed Melissa from the resort between 5:45 and 6 a.m., he would arrive at Waipio exactly when the SUV appeared in the photo. When linking forensic and image data, Kona PD emphasized in an internal report that the time frame matched perfectly. But the third piece, Andrew's statements, was what made the evidence chain coherent and incriminating. Andrew claimed he slept in the resort room until Melissa's family reported her missing. But forensic data indicated time of death was not as late as Andrew described. It most likely occurred in the morning, close to when Melissa left the resort. This created a serious conflict. If Andrew was sleeping in the room, how could Melissa die just hours later and be transported so far? Additionally, Andrew's statement that he did not leave the resort that morning was directly contradicted by the photographic evidence. A similar SUV to the one he rented appeared nearly 80 kilometers from the resort. Upon rechecking rental company activity, investigators also discovered that the afternoon of the disappearance, between 5-7 p.m., the Ford Explorer Andrew returned had been cleaned by staff under standard procedure. The timing of Andrew returning the vehicle aligned with the time frame the perpetrator could return to Kailua-Kona after leaving Waipio Valley, continuing normal activities as an uninvolved person. The fourth piece, motive once unclear in 2004, was now re-examined from a new angle. The investigation team revisited resort staff statements and noted details previously downplayed. Melissa appeared sad and quiet the night before disappearing. Andrew seemed tense and frequently left the dinner table to take phone calls. Room service once heard minor arguing in the couple's room. All these factors were once insufficient to establish conflict, but in the context of a homicide, they became warning signals. Investigators also reviewed personal motive. Andrew and Melissa were going through a strained relationship phase. Melissa wanted to break up after the Hawaii trip, a detail her family vaguely mentioned in old files. In many intimate partner homicides, the decision to end the relationship just before or during a trip can become the trigger for explosive violence. This was not direct evidence, but fit the perpetrator behavior model in intimate relationship cases. When placing each piece on the synthesis board, forensics confirming murder, geography confirming mandatory transport, photo confirming vehicle at the right place and time, Andrew's statements with severe contradictions, and relationship factors indicating possible motive, Kona PD reached the only logical conclusion: Andrew was the sole individual with the means, capability, time and motive to kill Melissa. No second suspect could fit the behavior model. No one else was at the resort that morning. No one else had an intimate relationship with the victim. No one else used an SUV matching the one at Waipio Valley. No one else lied about their movements. The evidence chain was no longer scattered pieces. It had become a complete structure pointing to one person only. Andrew Hartman became the central suspect in the murder investigation of Melissa Hartman, and Kona PD officially advanced the file to the next legal preparation phase. After the entire evidence chain converged sufficiently to turn suspicion into legal grounds, Kona PD prepared a request for a federal arrest warrant for Andrew Hartman, now residing in Riverside County, California, after nearly 2 decades away from Hawaii and no longer in contact with the victim's family. The Hawaii prosecutor, coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office, presented that Andrew was the sole individual capable of causing Melissa's death based on 2023 forensics, contradictory statements, movement data, and the SUV photo reconstructed from 2004 materials. When the federal judge approved the warrant, Kona PD immediately forwarded the file to the FBI Los Angeles field office for execution due to the interstate nature of the suspect fleeing the state after the victim's death. The FBI Fugitive Task Force began covert surveillance of Andrew, reviewing daily habits, work schedule, and transportation to determine the safest approach time. Over 3 days of monitoring, agents noted Andrew lived relatively reclusively, worked remotely, and had almost no social contact. A characteristic that could make arrest lower risk, but also meant the suspect had time to follow news. Since Hawaii media had reported the skeleton discovery at Waipio Valley, enforcement worried Andrew might suspect case reactivation and attempt to flee. Thus, deployment timing was significantly shortened from the original plan. On Tuesday morning at 6:40, as Andrew left home to go to a nearby store, FBI agents blocked the front of his vehicle, ordering him to exit. Andrew appeared surprised and confused but did not resist. The arrest warrant, was read clearly per protocol, and he was handcuffed on the spot under the watch of 2 security support teams. After transporting Andrew to the FBI Riverside office for processing, Kona PD simultaneously sent an investigation team to California to oversee evidence seizure. With a search warrant issued concurrently, enforcement seized all of Andrew's digital devices, including personal computers, old storage drives, phones, several early 2000 CDRs, and memory cards. These were items the investigation team hoped might contain residual data or deleted photo files. Information modern 2023, forensics could recover far better than 2004 technology. Additionally, the FBI seized old rental car records Andrew kept in a document box, a notebook detailing the 2004 Hawaii trip itinerary, and some printed Royal Kona Resort Hotel receipts Andrew retained as souvenirs, inadvertently becoming timeline cross-reference evidence. Andrew's current personal vehicle was also towed for trace examination, though the likelihood of useful information from this vehicle was very low. Still, per protocol, any item owned by the suspect was reviewed. During preliminary questioning in Riverside, Andrew immediately requested counsel and refused to answer all questions, which did not surprise investigators. He was quickly prepared for extradition to Hawaii under federal regulations for suspects prosecuted in another state. The arrest of Andrew Hartman officially marked the decisive turning point in the Melissa Hartman file after nearly 19 years of deadlock, paving the way for the next legal phase where the entire evidence chain would be presented in Hawaii court. The trial of Andrew Hartman at the Hawaii Superior Court opened in late 2023, nearly 2 decades after Melissa Hartman vanished, and the entire case structure was prepared by the prosecution based on the evidence chain connected after the victim's skeleton was found at Waipio Valley. On the first day, the prosecutor presented a complete reconstruction of the events of July 12, 2004, based on the original investigation file, data reconstructed from 2004 materials, new forensics, and cold case unit findings. The prosecution began by describing confirmed timelines. Melissa left the room at the Royal Kona Resort, early morning, last seen by resort staff walking toward the main gate, followed by an undetermined period where no independent witnesses saw her moving toward the beach or nearby public areas. The prosecution emphasized that from this point onward, all possibilities of Melissa leaving Kailua-Kona on foot were eliminated. As 2023 forensics confirmed, she was strangled very soon after her last sighting, and the body could not self-transport to Waipio Valley, nearly 80 kilometers by road, impossible on foot, with no bus or taxi routes matching the time. The body's appearance at a completely isolated location from the resort was the prosecution's key foundation. Melissa had to be transported by motor vehicle, and the only person with the time, means, and opportunity to access the victim was Andrew, the boyfriend on the trip. After the opening, the prosecution presented the 2023 forensic report. The skeleton showed external strangulation marks, not accident. Fabric scraps found with the body matched the style Melissa brought on the trip, and notably, bone distribution indicated the body was placed in a stable terrain position before landslide displacement. This was evidence the perpetrator actively transported the body to Waipio Valley and hid it in a secluded area, rarely visited in 2004. The prosecution also presented reconstructed tourist data, the silver SUV photo taken on the route into Waipio Valley early on the disappearance morning. Per EXIF analysis, the photo was taken from an old tourist camera around 7:20–7:40 a.m., perfectly aligning with the forensic death window. The prosecution did not claim 100% the SUV in the photo was Andrew's, but argued on 3 points. Color and model year matched the SUV Andrew allegedly rented in 2004. The road in the photo was the only route into the valley, and Andrew could not explain why the rental return record was imprecise, only noting late return, unusual for daily rentals. The prosecution relied on 2004 statement contradictions. Andrew said he was sleeping in the room when Melissa left the resort, but forensics proved the victim died during the time Andrew claimed to be asleep. He said he did not leave the resort that day. But if he stayed at the resort, there was no reason Melissa's body appeared at Waipio Valley the same day, and he claimed there was absolutely no conflict between them. Contrary to resort staff accounts of Melissa's unstable state the day before disappearing. The prosecution continued with parallel forensic analysis, strangulation marks consistent with rear approach, suggesting the victim was subdued before transport. Abrasion traces on arm bones indicated dragging over uneven surfaces, matching the terrain at the original burial site before landslide. Though these evidences did not name Andrew directly, the prosecution stressed they eliminated all accident scenarios and any chance of a random stranger accessing the victim in that narrow time frame. The prosecution reconstructed a possible route. Melissa left the resort, Andrew followed or intercepted her in a low-visibility area. Conflict led to Melissa's death. Andrew loaded the body into the vehicle, left Kailua-Kona within 30 minutes of the incident, and arrived at Waipio Valley before 7:40 a.m., a time frame perfectly compatible with forensic data and the SUV photo. Next, the prosecution presented emails, rental car receipts, and printed documents stored in Andrew's home document box, proving he retained trip-related materials but never submitted a copy of the rental contract to investigators in 2004. The prosecution argued this was not oversight, but signs of intentional concealment of vehicle usage time. In closing the presentation, the prosecution emphasized the case lacked direct witnesses, understandable in a crime at a remote location. But all indirect evidence chains converged on one scenario. Andrew Hartman was the only person with motive, opportunity, and capability to kill Melissa, transport the body, and conceal it for nearly 19 years. In the defense rebuttal, counsel focused on the prosecution's biggest weakness. No direct witnesses saw Melissa and Andrew leave the resort together. No cameras recorded Andrew's movements, and the SUV photo only showed a similar vehicle, insufficient legally to identify owner or driver. Defense argued forensics on 19-year-old bones had certain margins of error, and nothing proved Melissa did not encounter a stranger on the road. Defense claimed that Andrew lied. Conclusion was based on prosecution's subjective assessment, not legal evidence. However, in the closing rebuttal, the prosecution responded that the court's goal was not to seek absolute evidence like video or eyewitnesses, rare in cold cases, but to evaluate the reasonableness and consistency of the evidence chain. SUV appearing at the exact time, forensics matching death time and method, body transported rather than self-moved. Andrew's statements contradictory at key points. And most importantly, no alternative scenario, more reasonable, existed. The jury spent multiple sessions deliberating whether this tightly linked indirect evidence chain surpassed the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. They examined each link: forensics, body location, death time, SUV photo, Andrew's statements, geographic distance, rental data. Ultimately, the jury unanimously agreed the evidence chain, though lacking direct witnesses, formed a consistent, reasonable, and singular picture, and that the defense scenario, that Melissa encountered an unidentified stranger within less than an hour, was killed, and the body transported to Waipio Valley, was unrealistic and unsupported by any evidence. With that conclusion, the jury proceeded to the trial's final verdict. Based on the severity of the charges, the judge sentenced Andrew Hartman to a prison term under Hawaii law, a minimum of 20 years before eligibility for parole, noting that the act of transporting and concealing the body for nearly 2 decades was an aggravating factor reflecting the level of danger and calculation in covering up the crime. With this verdict, the file Missing Person, Suspicious Circumstances, once closed at the end of 2004, was officially reclassified as homicide solved, marking one of Kailua-Kona's longest-running cold cases resolved with full legal outcome. But the impact of the sentence extended beyond the legal realm. It sparked a profound wave of reactions within the Hawaii community. When media reported that the case was cracked due to two factors, natural disaster and modern forensic technology, many Big Island residents expressed mixed emotions: sorrow for Melissa's death, shock that the perpetrator was her closest companion, and astonishment that the case's fate shifted entirely because of a major storm causing a landslide at Waipio Valley. For locals, Waipio Valley has always been tied to the land's sacredness, and now, nature revealing Melissa's body was seen by many as a form of island justice, a gentle way of describing how Hawaii sometimes participates in unveiling truth in unpredictable ways. Forensic experts and law enforcement at Hawaii County Public Safety also viewed the case as proof that re-examining old files can yield results at any time, even after decades. The skeleton's discovery after the storm prompted investigation teams across the state to propose reopening at least 14 other missing persons cases on the Big Island and Maui, especially those involving rainforests, volcanic terrain, or high landslide risk areas. Technologically, the Melissa Hartman case is considered a prime example of next-generation forensics' ability to determine cause of death from dry bones, analyze micro-injuries, and reconstruct body movement. Details like strangulation marks on the hyoid bone, abrasion distribution on arm bones, and soil structure on clothing were factors that could not be fully analyzed in 2004. Many veteran investigators at Hawaii County PD admitted that without 2023 forensic technology, Melissa's cause of death might forever be recorded as undetermined, meaning Andrew would never have been held accountable. The community also paid special attention to the event chain, showing that reactivating an investigation depends not only on new evidence but also on re-evaluating previously overlooked points. Andrew's contradictory statements, once seen by 2004 investigators as not serious enough, became one of the most critical pillars when cross-referenced with 2023 forensics. In post-trial legal seminars, many experts emphasized that long-term disappearances are often closed before sufficient data exists, and without periodic reviews, such anomalies might never be recognized for what they are. The Melissa Hartman case also prompted the Hawaii community to question deeper about tourist disappearances in the early 2000s, a time when camera systems and digital data were extremely limited. Many longtime Kailua-Kona residents compared this case to other unsolved disappearances on the island, suggesting Melissa's discovery after nearly 19 years signals that seemingly hopeless cases can still be resolved. The victim's family, though having left Hawaii years earlier, issued a statement thanking the Big Island community for remembering Melissa and not letting the case fade into oblivion. Through legal representatives, they said the verdict brought a form of closure they thought would never come, but also reopened pain upon learning Melissa suffered a violent death rather than an accident, as they had hoped for years. For law enforcement, the case became crucial proof of the value in long-term file preservation, retaining evidence even without clear investigative direction, and maintaining the ability to reopen cases when conditions allow. Leaders in the Big Island Cold Case Unit declared that this case reinforced the belief that no case is truly lost, it's just waiting for the right moment for the truth to surface, sometimes in ways no one expects. Ultimately, the sentence against Andrew Hartman not only closed the Melissa Hartman case, but also opened a new chapter in community awareness about the importance of technology, perseverance, and unpredictable factors like natural disasters. It reminded Hawaii that truth can be buried by time, terrain, and silence, but never completely vanishes. And with a 19-year cold case resolved, the Kona community understood that justice sometimes arrives late, but when it does, it leaves a deep mark on the island's history. Residents' awareness and the memory of a young woman who vanished on a peaceful early morning in 2004. The story of the Melissa Hartman case, a 2004 disappearance solved after 19 years thanks to a major storm and modern forensic technology, carries many thought-provoking lessons for contemporary American life, where personal safety, transparency in relationships, and the importance of science are increasingly highlighted. The first standout point is the fragility of disappearances in the pre-digital era. Melissa, leaving the Royal Kona Resort while it was still dimly lit, with no cameras or phone data recording it, left 2004 investigators nearly information blind. This is a reminder that in modern life, sharing basic itineraries with loved ones, even just sending location or destination updates, is not control but self-protection. Another significant detail is Andrew's contradictory statements, once dismissed as unsuspicious due to lack of cross-reference evidence. But when 2023 forensics proved Melissa died just hours after leaving the resort, everything Andrew said became central. The lesson here for American society is in close relationships, especially romantic ones. Lack of transparency or minor inconsistencies can hide much greater risks. Melissa's transport to Waipio Valley also underscores the importance of community vigilance in tourist and remote natural areas, an issue particularly relevant in states with similar terrain like Hawaii, Colorado, or Washington. Finally, justice achieved through forensic progress affirms that science always opens new hope for seemingly hopeless cases. This is why Americans should support investment in cold case units, long-term evidence preservation, and federal data-sharing systems. As Melissa's case proves, truth can be concealed for 19 years. But with perseverance and faith in technology, justice can still arrive, even if late. Thank you for following this haunting 19-year cold case journey. If the story makes you believe in the power of truth and justice, please subscribe to join us for the next cases. See you in the next video, where we continue bringing buried mysteries back to light.